Mylar bags are an inexpensive way to package grains and legumes in your own home without any special equipment, and it lasts for up to 25 years.
Hi, we're the Provident Preppers.
Today we're going to spend about an hour taking this dried food behind us and packaging them into Mylar bags for our long-term storage. This simple change can make the shelf life go from about 2 years to about 25.
All this food behind us will provide our family with basic calories for 2.5 months. Join us and we'll show you how it's done. It's a party!
Mylar bags can be a great way to package your dry goods for long-term storage. Between our 90-day challenge that we did last year and the COVID-19, we've used a bunch of our storage, and as these products came available again, we've been repackaging and restocking our supplies.
Some foods are great candidates for short-term storage and that should be rotated through quickly. Others can be good to use in long-term storage, such as dried goods. Things like dried beans, white rice, wheat, oats, pasta, sugar, and dehydrated or freeze-dried fruits and vegetables. These items that you're going to store in your long-term storage need to be less than 10% moisture. Foods that have higher moisture content, such as granola or raisins or anything where there's moisture, should not be packaged this way. Whole grains will maintain the quality for much longer than anything that's ground. For instance, wheat can store 30 years or so, but flour only has about a 5-year shelf life. Whole corn stores longer than cornmeal, rolled oats will store longer than oat flour, and dry beans will store longer than bean flour. That doesn't mean that you can't package bean flour or oat flour, cornmeal, or white flour in a Mylar bag. It just means that your shelf life will be shortened in comparison to the whole grain. All Mylar bags are not created equal, so it's important that you're a good consumer and understand exactly what you're getting. Mylar bags are available in a variety of thicknesses and qualities. Typically, you get what you paid for. The two Mylar bags that are next to each other here, the one on the left is actually a Mylar bag that is designed to be able to be vacuum sealed, and you can't do that with all Mylar bags, but it's only a 4 mil, whereas the bag on the right is a 7 mil, which is ideal for food storage, and we'll explore that a little bit more. This is a Mylar blanket that we took out of our emergency supplies and opened it up. As you notice, the quality just wasn't there. I shouldn't have bought a cheap dollar store Mylar blanket. And on the same note, make sure that the Mylar bags that you purchase for your long-term food supply are good quality so that when you open it up in 25 years, you are not highly disappointed. Mylar pouches or bags that you use to package your long-term food storage should typically be between 5 and 7 mils. This gives you the greatest protection for those valuable food storage that you are putting inside that bag. Mylar bags can be purchased in the 1 gallon size, and we find that those are highly convenient. We recommend that you purchase those Mylar bags or pouches that are between 5 and 7 mils if you're planning on using them for your long-term food supply. These are 5-gallon Mylar bags that you place inside of a plastic bucket. The combination of the two provides an optimal storage life.
We recently came across these vacuum sealable Mylar bags. You cannot take a regular Mylar bag and seal those in your vacuum sealer, but these are specially made for that, and they did a really great job. They are only 4 mils thick, but they seem to be very good quality, and I think they'll hold up fine. As is the case with most things, it takes a little while to kind of work out the kinks and figure out the optimal way to do that. We started out filling the bags too full, which meant that we had to hold the vacuum sealer up or the grain would spill out. But once we got the quantity right in the bag, then we could lay them down and we had no problem at all.
We are frequently asked if it's okay to vacuum seal food storage in regular vacuum seal bags. While that will work, you will get better results by using a Mylar vacuum seal bag because the Mylar vacuum seal bags are 4,500% more effective at blocking oxygen penetration than the plastic vacuum seal bags. We were excited when we came across these bags because it's a great way not to have to use the oxygen absorbers and still have a really good result. Mylar bags do a great job of protecting against light, moisture, and oxygen And these vacuum sealed bags are also puncture resistant. Not rodent resistant, but puncture resistant. When you're looking at using oxygen absorbers or vacuum sealing, quite frankly, oxygen absorbers are the ideal because they remove all of the oxygen from the container. They work by chemical reaction. There is an iron powder in the packet that reacts with the oxygen, causing the iron to rust, and that removes the oxygen. Once the oxygen is gone from the container, that reaction stops. The packets will continue to work until the iron is gone, which is why you need to make sure that you purchase the right size oxygen absorber for the container that you intend to use it in. Why do we use the oxygen absorbers? Because it protects against insects that may have been in your grains when you package them. Insects require oxygen to be able to live, and by depriving them of that oxygen, you are depriving them of life, which is good when you're talking about it in my food storage. It actually preserves the quality of food by allowing the food to be in an oxygen-free environment, and it prevents the growth of aerobic pathogens. Make sure that when you are storing sugar in a Mylar bag, you don't put an oxygen absorber in there because that will actually turn that sugar into a brick.
If you end up with more oxygen absorbers than you need at the moment, make sure you seal them up quickly so that they will stay viable. In this case, I took the extra oxygen absorbers and sealed them in a vacuum sealed bag. Another option is this Mylar Bag Clip, which just seals that bag up tight mechanically and keeps them viable.
Or you can just put them inside of a canning jar and seal that lid. It's kind of funny because about a half an hour later, you'll hear this pop, and you can tell that it's done its job and all the oxygen is used up, but the reaction has stopped, and so those oxygen absorbers will be good to use when you need them the next time. Most packages of oxygen absorbers come with an indicator on it. As you can see, there are those 3 dots on this indicator, and that just tells you that this package has never been opened. If you look at the bottom of that canning jar, you can see that the little eyeball indicator that came with those has turned a purplish, which means that that package has been opened. Now, those oxygen absorbers inside that canning jar are still good, but it just indicates that it has been initially opened.
As we mentioned before, it's important that you choose the right size oxygen absorber for your need. Obviously, the smaller size won't work in a 5-gallon bucket, so you need to make sure that you size your oxygen absorbers accordingly.
For 1 gallon, you need between 300 and 600 cc's. Typically what we put in there is a 500, but we also sometimes use the 300. You can use larger oxygen absorbers in a smaller container. For instance, we could use that in a half-gallon container and wouldn't have any problems because remember that reaction stops when the oxygen has been consumed. For a 5-gallon bucket, typically you need between 2,000 and 3,000 cc's to make sure that you get all that oxygen.
It typically takes about 4 hours for the oxygen absorber to complete its work.
When you first fill the bag, the outside of the Mylar is nice and smooth and it's hard to see what's really inside that bag. However, a few hours later, it shrinks up due to that oxygen being absorbed, and you can see the indentations of whatever the food is that you have inside of that bag. If you're a professional, you're going to use a clamshell heat sealer or an impulse sealer to take care of sealing these Mylar bags. But at our house, we use what we know best, and in this case, it's flat irons or hair straighteners. You can also use a typical clothes iron.
If you are using the 5-gallon Mylar bags, the first step is to put that bag inside of a bucket. The next step is to fill that Mylar bag with whatever product you're using, and usually this is best done if you've got 2 people to help, one to hold the bag and one to fill.
Here we're filling the bag with pinto beans, but we want to note that because of everything that's going on, the food has become a little bit more difficult to obtain, and 25-pound bags of pinto beans were hard to come across. So we have a combination of 8-pound and 5-pound bags, and we did have a big 25-pound bag, but we're using all different sizes to be able to fill these bags.
To maximize the amount of food you can get in, then you want to shake the bag and let it settle down. And make sure you leave a little room at the top. In this case, we got a little overzealous and we filled the bag too full, which means that we just had to dig some out. Make sure you leave enough room at the top that the extra Mylar bag can be tucked down in and the lid can be snapped on tight.
Make sure that you label the bag. This sounds like a no-brainer, but it is so easy to forget which bucket has what in it, and then in your food storage you have mystery buckets or mystery bags of food. So take the time, and before you seal it, right on that Mylar bag what is inside.
When you have all your containers filled, then we open the oxygen absorbers and add them to each package.
And time is of the essence here, right? Because those oxygen absorbers, as soon as they're in the air, they're starting to do their job. So push the air out as much as you can and then seal the Mylar bag.
We start by tacking the bag in the middle and then at the 1/4 and 3/4 points. Once that is done and the bag is nice and flat, then we can seal the entire top.
And again, this works better when you're doing it as a family or when you have another person there to help hold it.
After you get that sealed, just give it a little squeeze to make sure there's not air coming out anywhere, that you've got a good tight seal. Then you push the entire bag down into the bucket so that you can get the lid on.
And now label the top of that bucket before you ever seal it so that you know what's inside. And when we seal, we put exactly like what kind of rice it was, the poundage, and the date. And the reason we put the poundage on each of the buckets is because it makes it easier to calculate how many pounds of food storage we have. In our family, our goal is 300 pounds of grain per person and 60 pounds of beans. And now for the fun part, you get to seal the top of the bucket with the rubber mallet, nice and tight.
With the smaller pouches, the process is basically the same. We start by labeling the pouches and then just begin filling and go through this same process.
You can use a typical clothes iron to seal these pouches. We want to make sure we begin with some type of a non-flammable surface. We just chose to use a scrap piece of wood. And then you take the Mylar bag top and you flatten it out. You want to tack it in the center and at the 1/4 and 3/4 marks, and then just take that iron and seal all the way across the top. And then check it by just gently squeezing and see if there's any air that can escape. And if not, you're good to go. If you feel that there's a little part of the seal that's not quite right, just send that iron down it again until you get it nice and tight. Okay, I think this is hilarious. You can seal the top of these pouches with a hair straightener or a flat iron, right? And it's funny to me to watch how the boys are doing this. John does not hold this hair straightener in any kind of a feminine way. It has never been used in his hand to straighten hair, that's for sure. And then the girls are very delicate about the way that they go about it. And yet the job gets done perfectly by both, just different styles.
It is critical to understand that these bags are not rodent proof, as you can see in this picture. This bag was given to us by a friend of ours, and they had packaged their food in these Mylar pouches, put them in cardboard boxes, and put them in the back of a closet. Several years later, when they were doing some cleaning, they realized that their food was gone. The rodents had gotten into these bags very easily and had totally destroyed their food supply. The way you prevent this is to store these pouches in a bucket or a tote, something that is a little more rodent resistant than just the bags themselves.
And that storage is really important, but let me give you a little tip. As soon as you put that oxygen absorber in the bag, these are very pliable and it's easy to be able to tuck them into the tote or a big metal garbage can or whatever you want to put them in. But once that 4 hours has passed, they become hard, kind of like a brick, and it's hard to tuck them in without wasting a lot of space. So make sure that you get busy and tuck them where you want to be right away. One of the things I love about Mylar bags is that you can cut that bag and create any size of bag that you want to just by sealing the ends. We don't use very many chickpeas at a time, and so it only makes sense to put those in much smaller bags for our family. However, pinto beans need to be in the 5-gallon bucket because we use a ton of pinto beans.
Another great thing about Mylar bags is that they are reusable. Once you've used the product in that bag, you can clean it and dry it thoroughly, and those bags can be used again. Obviously, they're going to be a little bit smaller each time, but you can still make use of this.
Preppers can find all sort of creative ways to build caches or supplies of tools or food that they might need during an emergency. But sometimes it's hard to keep those supplies safe from environmental conditions. We'll put a link in the description to discount Mylar bags. This weapon can be easily protected in a cache by simply putting it into the Mylar bag with the desiccant packets and the oxygen packets, and then when you need it, it's been protected from environmental conditions. As preppers, we come up with all kinds of fun ways to use these. Seeds store really well in Mylar bags. Just put the seeds or the seed packets inside. Do not use an oxygen absorber, and seal it, and you've created this wonderful light and moisture barrier that will help protect those seeds and help them store a lot longer in your seed vault. So get creative with your use of Mylar bags. The shelf life of foods inside of a Mylar bag varies depending on what type of food you have in it and your storage conditions. It is so important that your foods are stored in a cool, dry, dark, and protected area. Our friend forgot the protected part, and so the food was destroyed by those mice. The cooler the temperature that you store dry goods at, the longer they will remain viable. This is some flour that was stored in a Mylar bag for 20 years. When I came across this in our storage, the flour was very kind of grainy and it really wasn't palatable. It just wasn't edible to a standard that I was comfortable with. Now, if we were starving to death, we probably would have eaten it. However, if this had been wheat stored in this bag, it would have been perfectly fine. So what you store makes a big difference. But overall, you should be able to obtain 20 to 25 years shelf life in a Mylar bag of many of the foods that you store. Food storage needs to be a family project. It was so much fun to pull out this photo of our 4 little ones doing the food storage right there. They helped us actually package it. And yes, the handwriting on the top isn't, some of it wasn't even legible, okay? But it was darling. And they felt such a part of it. And we've taken these kids from the time they were very young, clear to now where we're ready to launch them, and they know how to store food. They know how to depend on it. In fact, Kenny made a really sweet comment when we were doing all of this, knowing that she's going away to college this year. She said, "Mom, if things get bad, can I come back here and eat this food storage?" And I couldn't even believe that was such a question. Like, yes, of course, that's why we have it. But our family has found such peace and security in knowing that our pantry is full, that no matter what happens in life, we have something that we can eat for dinner and we're going to be okay. And we encourage you to make this into a family event because it's good for all of us.
We invite you to check out the post that this video was made from, How to Package Dry Foods in Mylar Bags for Long-Term Storage. It has a lot more detail and a lot of good information. Check out our video, Long-Term Food Storage, for lots of information about how to build your program. Another video that might interest you is How Long Will Yeast Last? Obviously, that yeast will turn grains into really delicious bread. So check that out.
Packaging dried foods in Mylar bags really isn't as difficult as you may have imagined.
I'm tired and I hurt all over.
One thing that you might want to consider is that even though these bags are insect proof, they're not very rodent proof. They don't provide hardly any barrier. So you might want to consider storing them in a plastic tote or bucket.
And now for the question of the day. What experience do you have packaging dry goods in Mylar bags? Do you have any helpful hints you can share with our viewers? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.